Working in a messy timeline is pretty much like finding your way out of a maze. So when it comes to an efficient workflow, the tips I'm about to share with you come in quite handy. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Alright now, ladies and gentlemen, we're inside of DaVinci Resolve, and the first thing I want to show you is the clip setting up here, because that's pretty much what we're gonna come to when we want to sort our timeline down here. So first thing we can do is actually just click it, and we will see that the timeline disappears. Now, what else can we do? We can click this little drop down menu, and then we can see we can just sort for selected clips. Then only the selected clips we selected in our old clips here remain. So for example, if we select 3 clips, click on select, only those selected clips remain. Back to all clips. Now we can also say let's only keep the graded clips, or let's just keep the clips with fusion composition, ungraded clips, modified clips. So maybe let's talk about that a little. So the modified clips, we can say just keep the clips we modified without an interval of last 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. That can be quite handy when you're, for example, working with a client and the client sitting next to you, and you just want to have a brief walk over all those clips you just recently graded with him, so you can actually get his okay for those clips. Alright, then also unrendered clips shows you all the clips that haven't been rendered out so far. And then we get to flagged and marked clips. And now we want to talk about those flagged and marked clips a little bit before we move on. Now, why are markers and flags so useful? Well, because you can just go up to clips here and then say flag clips, any flag, and you can then see that only the flag clips remain. Now, if you introduced your own color code, for example, green flags need some certain sort of coloring, like a bleach bypass filter. Blue flags tell you that that clip is locked now. Well, you can come up with anything, right? Now, what's the thing about markers? Markers pretty much do the same as flags, but they do it for a specific time in your timeline. So if I choose any markers from here, only those marked clips remain again, but also I do have those tiny mark indicators on the individual clip or in the timeline in general. So for example, if you find out about an issue in a clip, say you think that your skin is too bright and you want to revise those areas with your client, you could place a marker in that moment and again say like, okay, markers, add a green marker, double click the marker, note skin too bright. Alright, so we see that her skin is too bright at that moment, and when we go back to our green markers, like choose those green markers, green, only this one clip remains. We can see the mark down here, and we head over there, see the marker, skin too bright, we know what we want to talk about with the client. So that's what markers do. Also, there's another feature to markers, which is keywords. Now, keywords are essentially the upgrade for markers. So once more, if we head over to that marker, keyword skin, okay, we're done. Now I can pick just a single of those keywords, hue chart, that I previously added in a marker to my hue chart node, and then again I can sort for that one, which can be very useful if you want to, for example, choose all clips that have those red jacket in or have a specific feature in, and then you just want to sort for those very quickly and pretty much compare those, match those. If you have a color that reappears all over again, for example a brand color, you want that to have a specific value, you can just tag that brand color and then let it reappear via the keyword setting. So if you're interested in learning more about keywords, I really recommend you watch the video by Scott Simmons. I'll link down to it in the description, because that one is really in-depth on keywords and how to get an efficient keyword workflow in DaVinci Resolve. And now let's move on. So let's go back to the drop-down menu. The next thing we can sort for is in fact people. And that's where it gets pretty fancy, because if you go to the media tab, you can actually select one of those clips and then say analyze clip for people. What it does, it searches for faces in the clip, and I'll fast forward pretty quick. And once it found people, you can just click those, tag as new person, girlfriend, and then it assorts all of those. You can also tag as girlfriend. It assorts all of those to that girlfriend tab. So here we are back in the color tab, and if we now head up to clips, people, we can actually sort for those clips that only include the people we choose before. So let's sort for clips with girlfriend and woman 1, and here we go, there's the other clip we added before. Nice, huh? Alright, now that we have explored the first basic sortings here, we can also see what grouped does, or let's get to that later and take a look at the other ones first. So down here we can sort for different operations we have performed inside our color tab. So whether we have dragged an image, have added noise reduction, used some open effects, or if they have different frame rates, like those three for example here. Alright, then again, we can also go back to all clips. We can sort for a change in edit sizing or input sizing, or we can look whether any of those clips have a different have a common media pool source as the one we selected right now. So let's do that, and we will see, okay, those two clips remain. Now also, if we have added matte nodes to some of the clips, which I haven't here, they would appear right there. And as a last thing, we can also even create smart filters, where we can just briefly add several properties from the entire set of data we actually have, and say, well, whether those properties are true or false, or yeah, contain certain things. So there's pretty much a broad range of smart filters that you can create, and you can get really in depth with those and customize them to your needs. Now I just went over the group tab in the clips drag down menu. So why is that? Actually, because I want to explore it a little more in depth than the other things we did before. So in fact, you can add groups to those clips over here. So for example, let's select those three, say okay, groups, and then we can either add them into the current group or add them into a new group. Let's say new group. Let's call this group charts. All right. So now when we right click on the group and say groups, then we see it's part of the group charts. We can also assign it to that group, load the group, rename the group, or delete the group. Now we can also say remove this single clip from the group, and then if we right click here, go to charts, we can assign it to the group again. Now why are groups so nice? First of all, we can see that it's part of the same group as the other charts down here. That's one thing. We can then also, again, clips, sort for charts only, and only the charts will appear. But the other thing that groups can do for us is we can actually head into those two tiny menus up here in a node graph that are called group pre-clip and group post-clip. And what that means is that we can actually apply corrections to that specific group before and after we grade the individual clips. That means if I, for example, take that clip we have here and change the hue of the clip, we can actually change the hue of the clip before we move into the correction of the individual clip. So let's move over there, and we can see that nothing is applied here. Then if we head over there and look into a group's pre-clip tab, we can see that the correction is also applied for that single clip. So let's disable this, and here we see the same correction is applied to all clips inside our group. That's pretty awesome. So if we take a look over here in our timeline, we can see that we have two clips that stem from the same original clip. Now, why do I tell you this? Because there's another handy feature in DaVinci Resolve that works in a similar way as groups do, but for clips that originate from the same source media. And this one's called remote grades. So we can say remote grades over here, and then I've already applied some grade in the node chart. Let's disable that one pretty quick. And then we can see that the grade I've applied for that single clip in the remote grade actually gets copied to every other instance of the single clip. That's pretty handy if you, for example, have an interview situation, or you have a commercial where you're using the same shot over and over again, and you just want that same look on all of those clips without having to go into every single clip and copy and pasting the grade you have applied to the first clip over and over again, because it all stems from the same source media. So that's remote and local grades versus grouping clips. You can of course also go into those remote grades and then group those remote grades again if you want to. What else can you do with local and remote grades? Well, say you have that remote grade applied to that clip over here, but now you decide you actually want to change it a little bit. Then you can go in there and say, well, copy that remote grade to local. And what it does then is it actually takes the remote grade from your image and it takes it to your local grade. So when we say use local grades instead, we find that our remote grade is inside our local grades now. This can also be done the other way around. So if you're in your last instance of your local grade, you can go to copy local grades to remote, and what it does then, it copies over the local grade. So let's maybe erase that one over here in our local grade and say, okay, copy local grades to remote. And what it's done now, it has copied the local grade to a remote grade, and we're working in the remote grade right now, means that we have copied the local grade for that single clip to all instances of that single clip. Why is that useful? Well, because if, for example, you forget to work in remote grades in the first place, and then you think, I want to apply that grade of the single instance to all instances of the clip, you can just use that feature and voila, you got it. So that was pretty much everything I wanted to tell you about how to structure your timeline. Now I want to talk a little bit about how you can structure your looks. Let's start off with individual clips. So say you have graded that clip in a manner that you actually like, but you want to try out something else. Well, what you can do is head up here and say, okay, local versions, create a new version, version 2, or call it whatever you want. And there we got our image again. And then let's say we don't like what we see. We're setting an upgrade and we're introducing some green because the image is too red for our taste. Let's head over here. Well, maybe even some more green, whatever. Add some blue. Okay. Maybe drag down the lift a little bit, even drag down the gain a bit, pull up the gamma, whatever. Okay. So now we've actually worked inside our second version, and if we want to go back to the first version, just go here, load, voila. Okay. Same is also true for remote versions. We can head over here. There's our remote version. Looks fine as well. So that's versions. So essentially versions gives you a copy of the same clip without deleting the changes you made for the first clip, and lets you pretty much cycle through those different versions rather fast. So you can just go from one version to another very quickly. And that's pretty much something that's very useful if you're working on a clip and don't have the one you want to judge the clip right next to you, and you're preparing several versions, as it says, of the clip, and then you're just getting feedback and you probably pick one or pick a new starting point for that one version. And that pretty much helps you out when you're actually establishing the look in the first place, because it really helps you set different tonalities, different moods, maybe even apply different contrast curves, all that kind of stuff that you want to experiment before you actually lock a certain look. In addition to versions, there are two more handy features that you can use in order to structure your grades, which are memories and stills. Well, what's the difference here? Well, for stills you can just right click, grab still, and we can see that another still appears in our stills tab. So now whenever you want to, you can just hover your mouse over that stills tab and actually see a preview of the grade that's on that still applied over here. You can also just double click that still, and then we can see that we can now reference the image we're actually working on right now to that still image here, which comes pretty handy when you want to shot match something. So a memory is pretty much a global version of a still. So you put it inside your memory tab, and then you can just cycle through that pretty quickly by taking looks at different memories. And that's pretty handy when you have certain grades that you already sort of locked and you want to put them in there. And you say, okay, that's what I want to reference. For example, your master shots as 5 memories or so, you can just quickly cycle through those master shots and compare them to the image you're matching to right now. Whereas stills you often use to just really grab a quick still, or even export those stills, you know, for advertising or whatever you really need those stills for. You can also choose to match the reference wipe frame, so that actually places your timeline cursor over the reference wipe timing that you took the still at. So yeah, you can pretty much do quite a lot here. You can even say display the node graph, and then you get that tiny node graph in here. And you can, for example, take that node and apply it to our node graph over here, and that's pretty nice because we've now just added the node from over there, from the node graph, to our actual node graph working in. You can also, of course, just take the grade and apply it. So I've just done that here, or you can even append the node graph. What this does is it takes the entire node graph of our still over there, like everything that was inside our correction there, and adds it at the back of our node graph over here, which is pretty handy if you don't want to apply the entire grade. For example, since you have made some changes in the camera raw tab, like over here, say you've changed the color temperature, and you've maybe even changed the ISO, and then if you just head it over here and clicked apply grade, you can see that that changes back to what it was in your still. But if you don't want those values to change, say 800, you can just say, okay, append node graph, and then those camera raw values are not affected, and we still have the corrections that were made in the original clip. Awesome. Now, why else are stills so useful? Well, that is because a big part of your job is actually matching one shot to another. So say you want to match those two shots, you just click on that still, and then, or you double click on that still, you can activate and deactivate the reference wipe over here, and then you can choose the style of the reference wipe over there. So you can pretty much have an opacity wipe, you can have a diagonal wipe, well, whatever you need. You even can see it in the waveform. If I just quickly bring it up and drag it over here, you can see that once I match it to the still, so over there, also a waveform changes, and we can see that we can compare those two images over there, which is also pretty handy if, for example, we decided to match our black levels over there and there, or match our white levels here and here. So that's pretty much the power of stills. So after watching this video, you shouldn't get lost in your timeline ever again. Also, by applying smart filters, you can effectively sort for the clips you really want to work on. If you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe button, and as always, happy grading and catch you next time.